Now it's time to recognize our State Technology Innovator Award recipient. This wonderful plaque goes to our State Technology Award recipient. It's really pretty cool. NASCIO established the State Technology Innovator Award to honor outstanding individuals who have made contributions to advance their state's technology policy agendas through the promotion of best practices and adoption of new technology advancements in service delivery. It's my honor and pleasure today to announce our award recipient, Ruth Johnson of Louisiana. Ruth, will you come up and join us? Ruth has a very impressive list of accomplishments, and I'm going to share a few of them with you now. Ruth serves as the Secretary for the Department of Children and Family Services for the state of Louisiana. She's been instrumental in reorganizing and modernizing the department while implementing new technology and systems to provide clients with more effective and efficient services. These accomplishments are pretty cool. Her recent accomplishments include developing an all-electronic time and attendance process to manage the state's child care assistance program, saving $1.5 million, partially in reduction of fraud. That's pretty cool, huh? It doesn't stop there. She launched a centralized intake system manned 24 hours a day to ensure consistent screening and decision-making regarding child abuse and negligence reports, and she's integrating a business case management across the department, bringing disparate legacy systems under one umbrella. Ruth, we applaud you for your accomplishments. Please join me in congratulating Ruth.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Well, first of all, thank you for that kind introduction. And there are some other people I would like to thank that made this possible. First, can't do that. They'll never forgive me if I break it before I show it to them. First, I'd like to thank Governor Genernal for being supportive of the changes that we've made in Louisiana. I'd like to thank Ed Dreesy, our CIO in the state of Louisiana, for helping me to migrate through the complex procurement process. In addition to everything else, just his support has been tremendous for us. And then finally, I'd like to thank our employees at the Department of Children and Family Services. They stuck with me through this, even though there were times when they asked me more than once, did you really mean 3 years? And I was like, yeah, I really meant we're going to do this in 3 years. And they've helped me to accomplish this. So I'm tremendously grateful to our staff. We've come a long way in these last 3 years. We looked a lot differently than we look today. Our department has reduced 600 plus employees. We've reduced $202 million from our budget. And this was also done at a time when we had the largest oil spill in U.S. history. We had Mississippi River flooding. We had 2 tropical storms. So we've been a little busy with other things as well, but we're really excited about where we are now. When we first came to the department, I was shocked and a little overwhelmed to find that if you wanted to have access to our services, you had to complete a paper 14-page application. If you called our department, you may get a person, but more likely than not, you're going to get a voicemail box that was full. Or when I called 6 different offices, I got 2 live people, I got hung up on, I got a busy signal, and I think it's still circling around waiting to answer my call in one location. When we started our site visits to the office, we went around and we were amazed to find the paper file rooms. that took up more than 15% of our overall office space. Some of our employees stacked files. They started with the regular file system, then they kind of crept on the floor, then they crept in the office, and in one location, they were even in the kitchen. Yes, confidential files in the kitchen. So what did we do? We started looking at our business processes first, because that's the key. Like I told my staff, we can give our employees the best technology system in the world, but if we don't change the way we do business, we haven't accomplished anything. So we went through and painstakingly mapped every single business process. Then we looked to see which kinds of technology could support that. What did we want to do? We wanted to stop clients from having to come to offices. Number one, these clients are challenged with transportation issues. So to say that they have to come to an office 4 or 5 times in a month to get benefits is not only cruel, it's not very efficient. So we got with our federal partners and we determined that we could do interviews over the telephone. We also determined that we could create an online application in a relatively short space of time. And despite what people thought, in some of our locations, our online application is a preferred method of applying for services. Then we looked at fraud. And as he mentioned, we discovered something very shocking. We found the healthiest kids in the country. We found kids that never missed a day of daycare. 100% of the time, 100% of the children were there. So we began looking at ways that we could improve that process, and that brought us to TOTS. What TOTS is a finger image that's taken for a caregiver of a child, and when they bring the child to the daycare, they scan their finger image. So now we know exactly what time the child obtained services, and we only pay for the services that were obtained. And we've actually done better than the first initial months. We're up to $2.2 million a month saved. That's $26 million a year. So, thank you. Then we looked at those phone systems. We had over 18 different 1-800 numbers. And I defy anybody to get the phone book and figure out which one's the right one, because I couldn't do it. So we decided we were going to have one single 1-800 number, and we instituted that in July. And to date, we've received more than 2.6 million calls through that call center. The majority of clients use the IVR. About 12% actually go to a customer service representative. This allows our workers to concentrate on true case management as opposed to answering the phone. Then we launched one of the things I'm the most proud of, centralized intake for child protection investigations. The way it was done before, the phone was only manned during regular work hours. Each office had different work hours, of course. There were some offices that had answering services for after hours. Some referred them to local law enforcement. So you can imagine there were calls that were missed. These are children's lives and safety. So we said, enough. I have this thing with time. It must move a lot faster for me than other people. So I told them, I said, I got 6 months. We got to stop this. I review every fatality and near fatality in the state. When I would look at the reports, some were very incomplete. Some of the decision-making was not well done. And so we trained a core set of staff to man a call center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And now, when an investigation worker gets that initial report, they know exactly who the contacts are. They have the right address. They have the right names, and they have the right household composition. And the decision-making is structured in such a way that we can rely on that decision to know which are priority reports and which ones are not reports. So I'm very pleased with that. If I leave nothing else, I'm glad that I was able to leave that contribution. But right around the corner is the big one. It's the Common Access Front End, or our CAFE project, which wraps around our 56 different legacy systems to create a single worker portal, a single client portal, a single provider portal that launches in December with the pilot, with statewide launch in February. So keep your eye out. We're very excited about that. And now with CAFE, clients will enjoy many of the same services that you and I enjoy when we log in to check our bank balance. They'll be able to obtain information, again, without having to come to an office, and they will be able to update and change their information. The other big project coming is document imaging and content management. Finally, all of those files will go away. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. The other thing that we were amazed to find out was that when a client moved from one parish to the other, and yes, we have parishes, not counties in Louisiana, we would physically take the file, put it in a car, and drive it to the other parishes. As with many other states, we have a large number of employees that can retire over the next, over the next 5 years. Yeah, see, I might be smart, but I'm very, very clumsy. They can retire over the next 5 years, and what we found was in our rural areas, our workforce was more stable. Unfortunately, that was not where the clients were. So with document imaging and content management, it will no longer matter where the client is. The cases can be processed statewide. So that allows us to adjust and shift our workforce to where we truly need it. And then that allows us to expand telecommuting or teleworking. We started with 35 teleworkers. We're up to 305. And I've charged them to add 300 a year. And this allows us to increase productivity. We make tremendous dollar savings. We save about $188 per employee per month. We use Skype for our telephone service. And we're able to track the number of calls placed and received and how long workers are on the phone. So that's been a tremendous, tremendous savings for us. Ed helped us figure out how to accomplish that and pull that off. So with all that, thank you all so much for this award. I am so proud to accept it on behalf of our state. Please keep your eye out on what comes next. We'll be doing press releases as CAFE goes out and as document imaging rolls forward. So thank you all very much.
Carolyn, thank you so much. We're going to do a photo op here so we'll get this. Ruth Johnson, you're our hero. Let's give another round of applause to Ruth, huh? Really great. Okay. I think we're ready to move on now, and I've heard that some people have kind of forgot what these ARS devices are for, so it's time to kind of refresh our memory about them. You want to find your device amid the lunch debris there. We have our next ARS question. What cloud deployment model are you leading with first? This is a state government only question. Private cloud, B, community cloud, C, public cloud, D, hybrid cloud, or E, cumulus cloud. Please enter your answer now. When you come, my heart will be waiting to make sure that you're never alone. There and then all my dreams. Okay, 55% private cloud, 22% hybrid cloud, and only 10% community cloud. That's interesting. I would expect maybe some more around community cloud. And 13% in the Cumulus cloud. But, you know, it could be worse. It could be Nimbo Cumulus. I think that's what brings the lightning and thunder. One more ARS question. This question's for everyone. What technologies, applications, or tools could benefit state-run health systems the most? A, secure enhancement tools. B, mobile applications. C, identity and access management tools. D, cloud computing. E, business intelligence and analytics. Enter your answer now. Wait a minute. Is there some answer sharing going on at this table? All right. Okay, this is interesting because we've got a pretty even split, 33% saying identity and access management tools. They're going to entangle this one with health benefits, and that's, I think, certainly where we're at in Oregon. 33% business intelligence and analytics, and then the other third really split between mobile applications, cloud computing, and secure enhancement tools. And with that, I think we have one more cloud question. Moving personal health information to the cloud would, and this is for everybody, A, enhance privacy. B, there would be no substantial changes to privacy. And C, decrease privacy. Life's a breach. That's my personal favorite. Okay. There would be no substantial changes to privacy. That's probably the right answer. Followed by 33% knowing that life is a breach. Okay. With that, let's move on to the next session. This is really going to be an interesting session because I think we get into some details about kind of where we're at now based on the latest thinking and surveys that we have done. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Carolyn Hinton. And Carolyn is the Vice President for State and Local Government for Tech America, and she's going to facilitate this next session. So, Carolyn, please join us. Thank you, Carolyn.
Hi, everybody. Tech America is pleased to be here today to help launch. Are you all coming up on the stage? Yeah, come on up. My team here, my panel. We're pleased to partner again this year for the second annual State CIO Survey. I'm going to hold it up here in my hand. I'm very proud of this document. It's an important product that communicates CIO priorities and concerns to other state leaders and to the industry partners with leading indicators of shifting and emerging trends in the marketplace. The team has again delivered a very strong document, both in its content and the quality of its appearance in both printed and electronic form. So first up, I want to thank the two other organizations that partnered with Tech America on this. A lot of credit goes to Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton is an important member company at Tech America and has been a leader in these kinds of documents for many, many years. In fact, they have been a partner with Tech America for 22 years with the federal CIO survey. So really appreciate the work that they have done. And of course, a lot of credit goes to NASCIO. In too many ways, Doug is a great leader of his team. He gets things done and has been a force in getting so many of the state CIO surveys to complete the survey this year. We had 48 CIOs complete it for a total percentage of 94% when you consider some of the territories. And finally, just want to recognize the Tech America State and Local Board of Directors who's been supportive of this effort. Caroline Ramking of CGI was supposed to be here today and was called away, but my colleague Michael Kerr is here somewhere in the office, or in the audience. There's Michael. So I want to acknowledge and thank everybody on the Tech America board that helped edit the final version of this important report. And so finally, I'm here to introduce Doug Robinson, who really needs no introduction in front of this group. But Doug is a longtime NASCIO Executive Director, responsible for the leadership of NASCIO, strategic planning, policy execution, government affairs, partnerships, emerging issues, board and committee oversight. His career spans 30 years. And so with that, Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can introduce your panel.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. This will be very, very quick in terms of an introduction, and we'll move into a substantial amount of data. But the point of this is a really interactive event, and that we'll have commentary from our three expert panelists. We have Dave Taylor, a longtime CIO from the state of Florida. He provides perspective of a CIO with 3+ years on the job, which is almost a lifetime given our CIO tenure. Carolyn Parnell, CIO from Minnesota, a relative newcomer, part of our freshman class with 7 months. So we have a compare and contrast in terms of the philosophies and perspectives we may hear. And then Graham Finley is director with Grant Thornton in public sector. And he's going to provide observations from our corporate member community and from the consulting range. And so, again, that's our format to today. I'm going to take a seat. We're going to actually have some interaction. We have a lot of data to go through in terms of the actual report. And you, again, will have copies of this report at the door, a limited number of hard copies at the doors as you exit after this session. And of course, you may download the PDF version on the NASCIO website, on Grant Thornton, and also on Tech America. So it was available. The press release went out this morning. So again, I hope you're all having a good time at the conference. Can I get a big shout out for the conference so far? All right, very good. So let me sit down here. Okay. The first question is, we have no ARS questions. This is my analog version. First, corporate members only. How many of you know your state CIO? Raise of hands. The state you live in. Okay. All right. I ask this question in every audience. How many of you don't like your state CIO? Anybody? So, okay. We have the Colorado votes here. All right. I asked that question. I speak at a lot of strategic partner meetings, and earlier this year I was at a meeting, and I asked the audience how many of them knew their state CIO, and they all raised their hand, which frankly surprised me. And I asked how many of them don't like, and 2 people raised their hand, and one woman then started to complain about her state CIO, and I said, I closed my ears. I don't want to know about this one. So let's talk a little bit about the survey and background and highlights, and I'll cover this very quickly because I really want to spend more time on our interaction and probing and insightful and extremely difficult questions to the people up here on the chairs because I want to make them uncomfortable under the lights. Again, I think Carol already covered the highlights of the conference program in terms of what we're going to talk about. The survey itself was we're going to call this a second annual survey. Grant Thornton has been partnering with Tech America for over 20 years to do the federal CIO survey. So we thought this was a very good opportunity and, again, part of our collaborative landscape. The survey itself is really what I would call, it's about perception and perceptions. We have a lot of data, but remember, this is really the opinions of state IT leaders. And again, 94% response rate. They were so tired of getting pesky reminder emails to me, they all gave in and answered the survey. So that's part of my job. Again, we did this during the summer in July we had, extension to about the end of July of 2011, and then developed the report and did the data analysis since then. So again, 48 states, District of Columbia, and 2 territories. We have anonymous quotes. Again, the anonymity of the responses were guaranteed, and we have quotes throughout the report, but again, they're not attributed. So they were able to really give their honest assessment. So let me cover the survey topics very quickly. And these, to compare and contrast to what we did in 2010, there's a little bit of difference because we wanted to have some longitudinal data, but we also wanted to have some new perspectives. So roles in governance is critical. Governance is one of the critical dimensions of the state CIO. And so that was one area that we wanted to talk about. And that's clearly part of the title of the report, and I'll get into that in a moment. Legislative affairs. This was a new topic. We wanted to understand that dynamic. A little more on the fiscal management side. Collaboration. Certainly you've heard a lot about that today. Consolidation and shared services. You've heard a lot about that. We asked some new questions around cloud, new questions around sourcing, and then 4 new topics for this year. Healthcare. We're going to certainly touch on that today. BI and BA, the business analytics intelligence space. We're not going to have time to cover that today, but I again offer you up to look at the survey around a few of the questions we asked around BI and BA, and then mobility. We will cover that today. Finally, in terms of just a narrative, We asked a unique question at the end. We said to the state CIOs, what 3 things do you excel at? We always hear about the pain points. We always hear about the things that have gone bad. We always hear about the negative connotations. We asked, what do you do well? And I was extremely gratified to see how much we had listed there in terms of what they think they do well. And we'll kind of summarize that at the end. So the highlights, no surprise to many of you, the budgets continue to drive. We've got fiscal stress, continuing budget concerns probably through 2014. The roles are changing in the CIO. Some of these answers we found actually surprising given the large number of CIOs that are new. Now, surprise, consolidation driven by that budget pressure. Healthcare is on the plate, and again, mobility is on the move. Let me talk a little bit about governance. I don't want to back up because we called this clout. So let me tell you a little bit about the title of the report because I neglected to really highlight this. It's C4, the C4 agenda. Now, we debated that from a marketing standpoint because at first blush, C4 is clearly probably most prominently known as a plastic explosive. And so I kind of looked at, as we kind of thought about how to call this C4 agenda, we said, is that the appropriate title? Well, CIOs are highly adaptive. C4 is an adaptive product. It's plastique. It can be molded. It can be fit into tight spaces to really solve a lot of problems. It's very stable under pressure. It can very stable under pressure. It's waterproof. So we thought these are all the characteristics of a lot of state CIOs, right? We can use this title. It's very flexible. It is really invincible to shock. Really is. It has to be imploded with some kind of device. I think the most important thing about C4 is it's highly explosive, and that may certainly represent some of our CIOs. So again, the title has dual meanings. You can take whatever you want, but we really want to look at collaboration, consolidation, clout, and change. So there's our C4 agenda. So our first response was around clout. I found this kind of surprising. We had 23 new CIOs in this cohort. And yet they all said, for the most part, their clout was increasing. So again, I thought that was kind of interesting. So to kick it off to our panelists here, I'm going to start with Dave because he's got over 3 years on the job. Your clout increasing and why?
I think it is. Of course, I have a biased opinion.
Yes, of course you do.
Wishful thinking is a critical feature of my job.
This is a perception survey.
I think that, especially in Florida's case, we've had a history of not doing IT really well at the enterprise level, and so the generalized opinion and clout of the state CIO was at an all-time low before I came on board. But through partnering and low-hanging fruit successes, we've been able to bring that up as time's gone on. So I do think that we're playing a more prominent role in general, and specifically in Florida, definitely have more clout.
Okay, Carolyn, the why in terms of the respondents of the majority of our CIOs that their clout was increasing is because of the consolidation agenda. So when you're 7+ months on the job, have you seen a difference? Have you seen that role changing?
It's a little bit difficult for me to tell, but I think I'm a bit of an outlier when it comes to a state CIO, if I can just go into that for a second. I started in February, which was 7 months ago. And you take the first couple of months just to meet the hundreds of people that you have to meet, employees, legislators, the governor's staff. We also had a governor in the last election who got the governorship by virtue of a recount, so they were just hitting the ground running when the legislation was, or the legislature. The legislature had over 50% newbies in it. And so then we kicked into some pretty unsuccessful budget negotiations, and then we started looking like we would have a shutdown. So then we had to prepare for a shutdown, and if you haven't ever had to prepare for a shutdown, it is a lot of work. It took about 6 weeks. Then we had the shutdown, and that lasted for 3 weeks, and then we had to ramp up again. And then right on the heels of that, the legislation was signed for consolidation. So I feel like I've already been through the gauntlet. It is a little bit different because they were so intent on getting this consolidation through, and I think they really saw the opportunity with a new CIO. And they were all interested in getting me on board and very cooperative in terms of changing language at my suggestion. So, yeah, I would say the clout was significant, and it was basically based on their real desire for a consolidation. They've been trying to get it through for a couple of years, and it just hadn't gone anywhere. So it was their opportunity.
So around that consolidation. Graham, as an outside observer, are CIOs blowing smoke, or do they have more clout?
I don't think so, and I think there's probably two main reasons behind it. Consolidation obviously has been looked at as a great way to drive dollars out of the IT budget, and in today's environment, that's been a pretty significant topic. The other thing, I think it's a recognition probably of it's a trend that's been going on for a number of years that state technology is less and less just a back office function, and it's more and more being relied on for actual program delivery, which brings the CIO back out into the program, and a much higher profile because of that.
Very good. So again, governance, clout, we see again the response that roles are certainly increasing. So we asked CIOs for their top 3 goals. And again, so we asked them to select out of a list what were their top 3 goals. And you can see from the respondents, rationalizing and centralizing, not surprising, controlling IT, and improving IT governance, always a challenge. Governance matters, but how it works, why it works, is always a challenge, and usually a significant issue on every top 10 list that NASCIO ever looks at in terms of the role of the CIO. So as you look at these, and again, we're looking at driven by operational cost savings around rationalizing the state IT services. Carolyn, would you kind of resonate with you, those top 3, or would you pull something up from the bottom, or how does that fit in with your responses?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And again, my point in going into the history a little bit was that we hadn't even had much time to think about how we were going to handle some of these things. I think the real driver for us is efficiency. I expect there will be cost savings, but I think efficiency and getting rid of replication and redundancy is really primary.
Dave, does that line up with your responses? I know you had them burned in your brain when you answered these questions online.
Yeah, those are very much in line with Florida's priorities and goals. The one, though, that's not in the top 3 that I would say is of concern specifically to Florida, we've been working on, is the 5th one, the security and privacy aspect of that, of all of our data systems. We're seeing a dramatic increase in advanced persistent threat events and just general infiltration, and it's becoming a big concern to us, and we're focusing a lot of time and energy on that as well. So that is, I think most CIOs will see that in the next few years rise up into the top 3.
So Graham, as you look at this, does this represent your view of the national landscape of what CIOs are focused on as top goals?
I think generally, especially the first 3, they really, I think, as Carolyn mentioned, they're really all linked together. It's about getting better use of state dollars in terms of the IT budget. How do you maximize the efficiency and effectiveness? Probably the one thing it wasn't as high in the list, but I see a lot of CIOs struggling with, is articulating IT value, especially to the legislature. How do you show that what you're doing adds genuine value, and when it's a difficult budget situation, how can you justify the budget that you're asking for?
And so we're gonna kind of good segue. We'll move into discussions around that. Again, I'm going to skip a few of these, but I want to provide some of the background data, and you will get much more data and analysis and commentary in the written report. But again, not surprising when we talk about what are the barriers to effectiveness within each state. And again, these are part of those pain point discussions, and we'll have a little bit more about this today, is that inadequate budgets, resistance to change, conflicting priorities. These are the typical types of answers that we could see, and could see a significant drop-off in terms of the ordinal ranking there. So again, we're going to be talking a little bit about that with our pain points discussion, so stay tuned for that. So let's look a little bit about legislative affairs and context. And again, I thought the response to this, given the data I've seen, particularly some of the work that NASCIO did 5 or 6 years ago, where we haven't really gone back and resurveyed legislative activities, legislative relationships. We asked some basic questions around number of contacts, and then we'll get into some details about what's the nature of those contacts and why they're important. But again, we have contacts per year, 5+ between CIOs and state legislators, and again, most of those probably occur during the session. So we have a fairly high percentage of those state legislators, state CIOs that are meeting with their either legislative staff or actual legislators. So that's interesting, but I think the really important part is looking at what's the role in terms of those relationships. So let's talk about that. Again, very high percentages in terms of being a policy advisor, advocating the governor's agenda. Suspect the most painful experience has to be the last one, which is providing legislative review. It's a legislative oversight function. And most of the time, at least in my experience, they're not being called over to a legislator to testify on how well these projects went. That doesn't happen. So you're going to go over there and you're going to get beat around the head and shoulders about something. So I guess, David, in terms, again, your active role, I know some CIOs don't have a green light to have an active role with the legislature. Again, your personal perspective on those roles and how you fulfill those.
The state CIO in Florida, by nature of its government design, has a fairly weak governor and cabinet structure and a very strong legislative structure. So to get anything done, you've got to be fully engaged with the Florida legislature. All of the IT initiatives that have come out in the last 4 or 5 years have all been initiated by the legislature. They've not come from the executive branch. So our sponsorship has largely been in the legislature. And so I spend an awful lot of time meeting with those officials, collaborating with them, garnering support, providing advice and input to them as well. So it's a very, very big part of the job in Florida.
So they're advocates for your transformation.
Absolutely.
Very good. So they're not obstructionists. That's good to hear. Carolyn, you talked about the shutdown. Obviously, that was an interesting experience, but potential shutdown. How's your relationship, and how does this fit into your particular situation?
I would agree with all of these. I've got a very good relationship with the authors of the legislation that created IT consolidation. I've turned this around a little bit and asked for a advisory group from the legislature. So I have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans that I meet with monthly. 3 of them were very involved and had actually been trying to get IT consolidation accomplished for a couple of years. My interest in meeting with them monthly is partly selfish, though, because I know now that they have this in place and it's not very prescriptive at all, I want to be able to manage their expectations, because I think they've got a lot of grand ideas for what can happen next. But they're very much engaged in this and very willing to advise me, and it's a great opportunity for me to keep them up to speed.
Graham, if you look at the responses, we'll get into this next data set, but we always want to know, the why behind this. And so is it the budget situation? Is it the fiscal stress that has elevated the role of CIO? Because clearly these numbers are higher than I would have expected.
Well, I think there's some of that. I think with the consolidation push as well. But some of it, I think, is due to how much more critical technology is to program delivery now. So that the success of major technology infrastructure investments can have a major difference on the success of policy initiatives as well. And I'd link this one back to one of the first responses around the increasing level of clout or influence that CIOs have. It's a sort of a two-sided coin there, because with increased influence comes increased accountability, and you have to take one with the other.
Too much legislative oversight, too little. Always a great balance. So again, as we move into some of the other more granular parts of the survey, we asked a lot of questions around financial management, funding, budget, source of funds. And again, this is always interesting, because this is what I spend my time, particularly at the federal level, explaining around the business model of the state CIO. That such a large percentage are 100% chargeback agencies. They receive a substantial, if not all, of their funds from chargebacks, fees for services to the agencies, and much of those dollars are coming from federal programs. And so it can create some opportunities, but generally it creates hives and all kinds of issues with state CIOs around their health. So again, in looking at the responses to this, we've actually seen a little bit of a growth in the non-discretionary funds, which I think is good. We're seeing more states being able to negotiate general fund appropriations to cover overhead and things like strategic planning and enterprise architecture. So the number of states that are 100% chargeback has gone down a little bit, and I think it's good because they've been able to diversify their source of funds. So as you kind of look at this, and I know it's a lot of data, Carolyn, where are you in terms of your budget, your revenue source, and how it's the composition compared to our total response?
Well, with our new legislation about consolidation, we are in transition, but prior to this, my organization was about 95% funded through chargebacks and about 5% from the general fund. In this new world order, though, the IT spend has multiple sources, and so we'll have to find a way of accounting for those different sources, given the fact that they do want to have that IT spend in one budget by the next biennium. So that will change over time.
Graham, what do you see on the national level? Get a national perspective. Here you got national data. Does this line up with your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think certainly the idea of diversification of funds, especially for those longer-term investment activities like enterprise architecture is referenced. But it's still the case that the vast majority or significant majority of services are funded by chargeback. And I think especially in the age of the cloud, when somebody can take a credit card and go to Amazon and theoretically, buy services through there, the challenge of showing value to the business user becomes ever greater. There's a much more competition now in terms of sources of services.
Dave, you've been able to work on sanitizing your rates for your agencies, or that's still a challenge?
It's of course still a challenge. We're a hybrid model on this, whereas the policy function is entirely general revenue appropriated, so we don't have to charge back for our policies. The service entities are all chargeback. And then since we are a very federated state, the agencies generally have their funding in their base budget for their IT operations. So the agencies retain the funds to pay the fee for service from the enterprise service providers as well. And that model actually works very well.
Good. Again, so I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend here, and I know that's continuing challenge, and as part of that, articulating the IT value proposition beyond simply the agencies and getting your budget officers and the governor's office to realize you best to be diversifying those funds, and in that way it kind of lowers perhaps some of the tension between the service agencies you're delivering services to. So I think that's a challenge. Collaboration, part of the big C agendas. We talked about clout, and now we're going to talk a little bit about collaboration. There's been certainly a lot of dialogue at this conference, and we'll continue to have that around collaboration. And we looked at collaboration very, very broadly in terms of multi-state collaboration, CIO to CIO, multi-agency collaboration. And you'll see some data here next around this. But I think the motivation for collaboration is clear, and look at the data that we have in front of us. It's around cost savings, and I think we'll continue to see that at least for the foreseeable next couple of years until the states really start to begin to get back to baseline. We're still now where the majority of the states haven't reached that 2008 plateau. And again, most of the fiscal experts and financial experts don't believe that will happen until 2014 for most states, if not beyond for others. Many of the states, unfortunately, are not gushing oil like Lisa in North Dakota, so they don't have that opportunity to have that spend. But again, I think you've got motivation is clear here on this data, so I don't want to spend too much time. Maybe talk about another C agenda, and that's around consolidation. So we certainly believe, as we've kind of termed this end of the survey, the consolidator-in-chief role is clear with today's CIO. On their agenda, the 23 new ones, as well as our cohort of veteran CIOs that responded to this, this is really what they've looked at in terms of completed, in terms of the consolidation agenda. We asked around planned, we asked around completed, we asked around future. What we found, interestingly enough, in the percentages around these top 12, they were all almost in excess of 90%. So when you look at your full data set, you will see in many of these cases, their planned consolidation efforts around telecom, email, data centers were all 98% planned to consolidate, 97%. So it's clearly a vision that they intend to execute on. So as you look at least the top data points here, Dave, what are you in terms of the consolidation efforts, and where do you see your future targets and maybe some challenges in there?
We're very much in line with that. We've already completed our telecommunications consolidation. That is complete.
So you're 100% of that.
100% complete in
Good.
Telecommunications consolidation. We are about 12 months away from finishing our email consolidation to our enterprise email cloud solution. Data center consolidation is between 1/3 and 50% done at this point. We've recently, this last session, got security declared as an enterprise service, so we're beginning to figure out how to operationalize the number 4, and we have requested legislation proposed legislation this year for backup and disaster recovery to become an enterprise service. So we're working down that stack pretty much as it is.
Very good. Carolyn, how does this resonate with you?
Well, before I arrived, there had been a good deal of progress on sort of common good services, email, telecom, although not entirely. But it had been a sort of matter of attraction and sort of talking people into it. And there was a very good business case for it, but there were still people who had sort of the freedom to say, well, no, we would rather keep our own email system. I think that consolidation is going to just facilitate the business case for the consolidation of all these services. Mm-hmm. We're so new to it. We're in like day 40-something of a multi-year project. So I look forward to that option of.
So you expect to be done by June 30th, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
The governor.
2015, 2016.
Right. Very good. Graham, and again, national view, the kind of the eagle's eye view of what's going on in here, is that too low, too high?
No, I think it's pretty representative. I thought the one data point that I think jumps out to me is business applications, which is, it's at 8%, which is significantly less than all of the others. Right. I think there's some, sort of obvious reasons for that. It becomes much more complicated when you get into program systems and you really start moving people's cheese. But there are significant opportunities for legacy system retirement, savings in operations and maintenance. But on the flip side of that, these kind of consolidations require generally a significant capital investment, and the money to do that just isn't there in many cases. Yeah. So it's not surprising it lags.
Yeah, and if you look across, you don't have all this data in front of you, but in your report, you'll see, I think desktop support is one I think that many of you know is extremely painful. So we see a lower response rate for that, and also a lower plan. So that's not something that's in even the short-term vision for a lot of CIOs. So I guess continuing with the theme of the 4 C's agenda, we've covered kind of the cloud side, we've covered the collaboration side, we've covered now the consolidation side on the data points. So we ask CIOs, again, questions around the background. We want to understand the rationale. We want to understand their challenges. So if we go, I guess, back to Carolyn, to look at these, governance continues to come up. How do we get it right? What does it look like? What about those shared decision rights? But again, I think people don't realize that one of the things you often need is kind of that CapEx, and that's the fiscal challenge of the states is obtaining that upfront capital. Even in consolidation, you may have to do retrofitting of your current data center. There's a lot of work that has to be done, but you may need to spend money to save money. Tough sell with the legislature, tough sell with the budget office?
Our consolidation didn't get any funding whatsoever. It was like, well, you can...
Pretty tough sell then.
Yeah, you can use the savings that you find to reinvest in consolidation. But we did get money we got $5.6 million for consolidating our data center, which is a good start. We were doing it anyway without any capital funding at all from the legislature. But my biggest concern in terms of consolidation and shared services is really establishing those baseline measurements so that we know what we've accomplished going forward. So we're working now to establish KPIs. We're looking at each agency and their spend and sort of developing an as-is state so that we can sort of consistently over time measure the value of consolidation. We're taking that very seriously.
Dave, as you said, you have a highly federated environment, but I know you've got a major email project in consolidation in the cloud. So again, what issues and challenges, how would you rank those in terms of your experience to date on some of these areas?
The top 3 are probably equally painful. I'd have to say Florida probably has the poorest governance structure of any state. I'd love to debate that with any of my peers. But the fact that by statute we have 4 separate agencies that are enterprise service providers, and in law they've largely been set in competition with each other. That makes life very, very interesting. My number one priority this session going in is to champion a much more rational governance structure for Florida. Not that what we have now cannot work, it's just amazingly inefficient and slow. So we can optimize our governance structure, we can move forward a lot faster. And I think there's support for that. We've had an ongoing problem because we initiated our consolidation activities and rationalization activities during, right after the crash, is that there's been no capital money to work. So I like to say in Florida our philosophy is we follow the return on investment philosophy. However, we're required to get the return prior to making the investment. And that's been pretty much our rules of engagement for the last 4 years. It can work, believe it or not. We're making progress. But the real challenge has been in partnering and working with our agencies that are getting consolidated, is helping them understand what it costs them now so you can then make the business case.
I thought it was free.
It generally is free, or they make a slight profit off of implementing any service.
Right.
But yeah, getting that accurate base information so it can stand up to scrutiny when you make a business case to do something different. Those are great challenges.
Yeah. So let's kind of look at some of the financial considerations. Again, we're looking at are the consolidations delivering the cost savings, and I think we actually, look at this data. We've got some very honest responses in terms of the CIO perception, including the fact that they didn't measure that. So I guess if we've got our charts kind of difficult to see up here, but Graham, as you look at this, I felt that this was probably a fairly honest assessment of the CIO landscape out there, is that they did recognize that they didn't measure the savings very well, perhaps.
I agree.
Yeah.
It really ties back to the prior slide.
Right.
When you look at some of the more significant challenges are not understanding where your baseline was. If you get into a consolidation process and you're already part way down there, you sort of lost the opportunity then to go back and really credibly define, these are the savings. And I think there are a lot of, states that are sort of part way into the journey already, but they didn't define the baseline, so they're going to have difficulty, really showing the return once they're done.
So certainly a lot of state CIOs have used business partners to come in to be able to do that, what I called asset discovery, and do that as is. Did you do that, Carolyn, or are you doing that on your own?
I think a year and a half ago, the legislature had asked for a study. So we brought in a consultant, and they worked for about 6 months with agencies to get a self-reported amount of the IT spend. We used that as a baseline. We had a very aggressive schedule from the time the shutdown was over, which I believe was in the end of July. We had to have, by October 1st, all of this IT spend baseline identified. So we've been in a sprint to pull all of that together. And we did use that previous study as a baseline so that we knew it was kind of a reality check. But we did not use outside resources for that short-term tactical approach to getting that baseline that we'll be deciding what we do in the future.
So again, critical to get that as is. If you don't know where you're going, any road will do. So it's always good to look at that. So again, as we look at, we didn't add this into the title. It could have been a 5C, but that didn't work with our 4C explosive model, so we stuck with 4. So we have cloud, we've got collaboration, we've got consolidation. C for cloud is actually part of the whole change paradigm, part of the whole change agenda. So we're going to get into some of those both technology issues and policy issues that clearly add another dimension, add another set of balls that the CIO has to juggle on a daily basis. And one, which is some longitudinal information, is all about cloud platforms, cloud strategies. We asked in 2010, as you can see the data, where the states were in terms of their status. Invested, some application, still investing, or not moving at all. And again, you can see that there has been some movement, slower than I probably would have anticipated given the number of conversations. I don't think I can have a phone conversation with any state CIO or CTO where cloud doesn't come up. But again, I think they're a little bit slower perhaps to pull the trigger. Continuing challenges, as you all recognize, around what the right business model is, the right approach in terms of architecture. Is it private? Is it public? Is it hybrid? A lot of different opinions out there. But CIOs are stepping out in terms of cloud services. So we've got, again, a fairly significant, almost a tripling of the highly invested, up to 14%. So we are seeing a lot of that movement. I will tell you that given what has happened in the last 2 months, doing this survey probably during October timeframe, we'd see even more states as we see these announcements around public cloud solutions or private cloud, particularly in hosted mail messaging and collaboration tools. So I guess I'll go to David, because I know he's involved in a major cloud project. The magnitude in terms of what he's dealing with is pretty substantial. So you're about to become highly invested, at least in one line of business in cloud.
Correct. We awarded a private cloud for 115,000 exchange mailboxes in July, June 30th. So we're beginning implementation of that right now. Florida in general is highly invested in moving to cloud. And this seemed to be, of all the business applications that we have, IT applications, the one that we should be low-hanging fruit. If you can't do email in the cloud, it's going to be real difficulty to do your licensing systems and other more complex business processes. So we're really cutting our teeth on this. We're anticipating a huge success with our partners on this. And if this goes well, we are going to aggressively pursue other cloud opportunities.
Very good. And you were able to, I think the most unique thing is you're able to get your law enforcement community to buy in. So
that's correct. Yeah. And that did raise the requirements of the system, right. Increase the cost somewhat, but we think that keeping all of our executive branch together in these systems is worth a little extra.
So take note, CIOs, the guys with guns are in the private data center, so that's good. Carolyn?
Well, as we speak, we have thousands of accounts being moved into the cloud for exchange. It has been a year-long project. I think it was announced last year at this particular convention that's what we were moving towards, and it's been very successful. It's happening. We've had a lot of questions on it, so we are actually working with Microsoft on a case study white paper because it really has been a successful undertaking. So,
other applications that you can see that's on the horizon?
We'll get through this one first.
Yes.
Graham, I guess looking again at the national view and maybe even looking at federal government, private sector, maybe a little bit slower, but clearly a lot of traction.
Yeah, I think that obviously it's the topic on everybody's lips. In my mind, everybody's doing something around the cloud. Many states would say, well, we've sort of been doing cloud for decades, but it just wasn't called cloud back then. If there's a barrier to really accelerated adoption that I'm seeing, there's still some significant policy and sourcing questions that states have to decide about when should you be using the cloud, and when do you go private, when do you go public, when do you go hybrid. Those kind of policy level issues, I think, have to be worked out in a lot of places before there can be really significant adoption.
Okay, very good. So again, part of the C agenda. Talk a little bit about sourcing and IT workforce. Again, part of the change agenda is one of certainly the move we've seen, and it's been documented in a number of reports around looking at the move from so I call it the less steering and more rowing, and from the private sector. So the states are good at steering. And they're maybe not so good at rowing in some of these areas. And again, I think what we're seeing is the ability of state CIOs to manage a portfolio and look at the options in terms of the sourcing, and maybe what are some of the inhibitors. Again, I think every CIO knows as soon as you start talking about outsourcing, you get a little bit of pushback and resistance, either internally from the agencies or from your workforce, or maybe some political opposition. So again, I'm going to ask my panelists to go back down here to Graham. As you look at this, I think there is a general assumption that the private sector solutions are more cost effective or they have a more favorable ROI. But again, we're seeing half of our respondents say that's not necessarily the case. That's like slick chic marketing. Be careful.
Well, as part of the vendor community, obviously that's our story.
Right, exactly.
But, I think the top three results there, to me, point to one core issue with the lack of a real apples-to-apples comparison. How can you really have a good comparison of the cost of a vendor solution and the return on investment of that vendor solution versus the real costs of the state solution? When you bring in all of the indirect and direct costs. If you have that kind of apples-to-apples comparison, it allows more data-driven decisions. But in the absence of that, then obviously politics, play a significant part.
Yeah, definitely. David? Any of those resonate with you as being one of your top inhibitors?
Our experience, we've done some other test outsourcing, getting some quotes on some other opportunities to remove things from doing it ourselves to having other people doing it. Actually, it's been quite surprising that they're not slam dunk pricing that we're getting back. And when you add it all up, it's even an email for the size of that. Okay, we saved some money, but we thought we would save more. And that's even after beating up all the bidders down to get it to a reasonable price. So I don't personally see that all of this is going to save a tremendous amount of money. I see it much more as a risk mitigation activity. We're very, very concerned going forward 5-10 years from now that the government's going to be able to field a competent workforce at what we can afford to pay and the number of positions we can put on the table. I think moving to a utility model of outsourced managed services is really a risk mitigation strategy as much as it is a cost-saving strategy.
So, Carolyn, in terms of these responses, the state workforce composition, the work rules, union issues, you don't have those, do you?
When I first started, the legislation on the table was very prescriptive around outsourcing and layoffs, and the same report that I spoke of that was put together last year promised, gazillion dollars in savings, had numbers of people who could be laid off. And that was very alarming to me. Now, I'm not against outsourcing in any way, but I think it has, and in fact, we outsource our network all over the state. But I think it has to be a very conscious process after a lot of collaboration and cost analysis. Well, then, with apologies to Chris, Wisconsin happened. And it was close enough to us that I think that the legislators thought, wow, let's pull back on those kinds of expectations, and then we'll be able to get something through. We've got a pretty pro-labor governor, so my biggest concern is managing the retirement factor, and keeping and hiring the right skill sets going forward. So,
what is your retirement? What's the percent of those eligible retirement? Do you know?
I have a estimate of 10% per year over the next 3 or 4 years, and that's about upwards of 200 people a year. That's a lot. So I call it a real brain drain.
Very good. Let's move on to our kind of a little bit more detail about this, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, but again, this is around the part of the clout agenda as well as the CIO should have the authority. And again, not surprisingly, this is the perception of the CIOs that they should have that authority to be able to do that. I was surprised to see public sector union response as low as 10%. But again, we have about a quarter of the respondents indicating that state personnel are competent to deliver the services, but that the unions create adverse impacts on service delivery. So clearly, there will continue to be those dynamics and substantial change and shift within that public sector workforce. So we'll continue to monitor that. This is something we may want to look at next year. So let's kind of wrap up with a couple of major areas that we asked a new set of questions on. And the first one was around healthcare and the growing role of the state CIO in what we generically termed health benefit exchanges. So we have the health insurance exchanges, we have the health information exchanges. We have a lot going on in terms of the state landscape with health. We have federal mandates. We have 2014 for health insurance exchanges. So we asked some general questions. Given a very complex public policy arena in healthcare, will CIOs have a role in these health benefit exchanges? So again, I'm going to go back to my expert panelists here and ask where they fit in on this in terms of, are they collaborating? Do they have a role? And how extensive that is. So Carolyn, what's your role today in the health exchange and health HIE area?
Growing, I would say.
Something you didn't want on your plate, probably.
Well, it's happening, and one of the first things that Governor Dayton did when he took office was turn over the previous administration's decision not to accept federal dollars for design and planning, and there's now a kind of skirmish in the state about who gets to decide whether we will build an exchange or not, and that, there was big press about it yesterday, so it's going to continue. But we do have an effort going on, both for the exchange and that's in the Commerce Department, and for eligibility in the Department of Human Services. And they're working very closely together. So the exchange will sort of lead it, but the eligibility will be close on the heels of that. So, and we have worked on some collaborating efforts with other states. The time is of the essence in this particular undertaking, so we'll see how it rolls out.
Dave, you were formerly the CIO for the Florida Department of Health, so you know a lot about this.
Right. Unfortunately, that got me dragged into this even in my current job. I was quite involved in the developing business requirements for our health information exchange, and I was an evaluator on that. Florida awarded a contract for that, and we're well on the way for that now.
So you'll continue in that role? You're going to be on part of the governance structure, or yet to be determined?
No, actually, just because it's being handled so well by our Agency for Healthcare Administration, I don't really see needing to have more than just an as-needed advisory role at this point. Our way forward is very well cast at this point.
Okay, good. Graham, this is, as I mentioned, probably if not the most complex public policy area for both decision-making. It's highly partisan. There's a lot of money on the table.
And it's a moving target.
Right.
What I thought was interesting about a lot of the responses we got was, almost all of the CIOs said, yes, I will have a role, but many of them said, I don't know what it will be.
Yes.
And I won't know for quite a while, or it may change, every quarter. So I think this is going to shake out over the next 12 months. And, if we're sat here next year, it might be quite a different picture to what it is today.
I think we all hope that the role isn't catching whatever's thrown over the fence to them, that they're involved early on. So kind of to wrap up on another technology area that we know has received a significant amount of attention is around mobility. So we asked a series of questions around mobility, both in terms of how it fits into the strategy of the CIO's portfolio. Many of the states that are working on or have finished a strategic IT plan. Was mobility part of that? Where does mobility fit in terms of their priorities as well as their maturity model, their capability? And so you'll see some responses around here, and we'll ask for some observations and commentary. Again, we asked about where they put mobility as a priority, and again, essential I thought was very, very interesting. But all of them have a high or medium. So a very small response said low. So clearly, mobility and mobile apps, devices, both internal, external, is a big part of that conversation. So I guess I'm going to go back here, get the national perspective first, because this is both an area around the consumerization of products coming into the state, as well as the citizen demands for mobile applications, since their third screen is their main screen now. So perspectives on that, Graham?
Well, it's a push and a pull. I think people are seeing a lot of opportunities to improve, citizen engagement, employee engagement through the use of mobile devices, but also the employees and the citizens themselves are saying, I want this application on my device. I was talking to a CIO probably about a month and a half ago that was reminded of the early 1980s when the IT department was all about the mainframe, and people started bringing in these things called personal computers, and they had them on trolleys, and they'd be wandering down the aisles, and people would borrow them, and the IT department said, that's not us. We don't deal with that kind of stuff. But that only listed for a couple of years, and all of a sudden, now it's enterprise IT, and mobile's going exactly the same way.
Carolyn, you have a fairly rural state with those 10,000 lakes and a lot of people out there. High demand for mobile applications. Is that a priority for you?
I don't know if there's a high demand. I think there's a huge opportunity. I think it's happening in pockets around state government, but I think we need to elevate that. And even if they're just a kind of one-off applications, I think citizens would appreciate that. The state and what it does can be more visible to citizens, because a lot of what we do is just behind a big door. So I'm hoping that's something that we can grow considerably. When it comes to the actual mobile phones and smartphones, now that we have new IRS rulings, I'm hoping we can just have everyone bring their own smartphone or their own phone and just get out of that business.
So for state employees, you're in favor of bring your own device, and you're going to have a policy for that?
Very much so. And in fact, before I started, I got an email saying, what area code would you like with your BlackBerry? So I called my CISO, who I happened to know before I started, and said, heads up, I'm bringing my iPhone because I don't want to carry 2 devices. And they had already been going down that road, so they sort of sped it up a little bit, and it's no problem. And one of the biggest benefits to me is that as I went around and visited the new commissioners, my cohort, they had 2 devices, and I said, I can help you out with that. So they've told me if I don't do anything else, the fact that they now only have to carry 1 mobile device is good enough for them.
Good customer service.
Well, it's great.
David, we're in terms of your strategic agenda, you have I think your demographics in the state are probably a few years older than a lot of states.
They are.
But I know that that's also a growing population for mobile devices, mobile services.
I see a high demand in the lines of business for those lines of business that have case managers, inspectors, and so on to really push the technology out to the worker at the edge in the field. And so we're doing a lot in those lines. We haven't done a lot of enabling citizen-based smart apps to come into our, and I see that as probably the next wave going on. Now, in our email system, by design, we anticipated that most employees would be tapping into email from an agnostic device, so not smartphones, airport kiosks, whatever. And so we architected it that way. From a cost standpoint, for example, it's for an active sync connection to the email system, it's 11 cents per user per month. I mean, that's a blip on anyone's budget. So we anticipate the number of connections to just skyrocket as the years go because it's so much cheaper than making, say, a BlackBerry connection. Infrastructure-wise. So we're very heavily invested in it and writing policy now to hopefully herd those cats.
Well, so when we kind of look at that, again, a lot of data on this chart, but from the maturity, the readiness and engagement, we have a kind of a mix. We have about 1/3 of the states that say they may be engaged. We're looking at the opinions of the citizen-facing apps, which you just mentioned. Carolyn, is your organization ready and able? Do you have mobile developers? Do you have a mobile strategy you believe you can support this demand?
Again, I think we have pockets of it. We don't have a good collective approach to it, so I think that's one of our biggest opportunities going forward.
Readiness, it may be a challenge, though. Dave, you indicated that you didn't have the citizen-facing apps. We see, I think, 40-some% that they have a higher level of engagement. You think that's going to grow?
I think it'll grow. I absolutely think it'll grow. Where anyone has any outreach role in government, they will have mobile applications enabling their full capability in the field.
Very good, very good. So again, we kind of covered cloud, we covered health, and I'm going to kind of wrap up, and we may have about 2 minutes and 16 seconds for some questions before we let you we've captured you in here. So again, I would say to you that we ended, and I offer you up to look at the survey because we captured a lot of information around. We asked the CIOs to describe, their innovative vision, what they're focused on, and where their programs and policies. This was the first time we really asked questions to say, go ahead and raise your flag and tell us what you're doing well at. And again, we've just summarized this on this one slide, but verbs like consolidate, collaborate, not surprising, cooperate. Again, I talk about a lot of words that end in T-I-O-N, and we had certainly a lot of those examples. We see the enterprise vision. We see, again, unification, harmonization, very, very common themes around the responses of our CIOs. And again, if you look at the last three, these were the three common areas where they felt that they were excelling: advancing the communication infrastructure, the customer-centric, citizen-centric kind of focus. And one that was interesting to me was transparency. We had a fairly large number of respondents in the open-ended say transparency was part of where they were really excelling, whether it's an internal focus or within their kind of open door and open books policy at the state. So with that, we've got a couple of minutes. We'll take very, short questions. Anybody have any questions? Sonny, we have a question up front. Are you on? Okay. I think that your question was so long, Sonny, I think it burned the battery out, so try that one.
this is an excellent session. So how can we learn from you and from share information and you all ahead of us and a lot of other states, we want to kind of exchange information, learn from each other. Is there a way to collaborate and actually look at, for example, you quoted some statistics, and we are really interested in looking at not reinventing that same wheel. So in our state, and I'm sure others, if we can learn from each other, I think the future is clearly about leveraging solutions with each other as opposed to reinventing the wheel. So how do we share is the question, I guess.
Well, I think clearly I'm biased, but this is how we share. One way is having a great NASCIO meeting where you have peer-to-peer networking. We know that that's the highest value proposition for our conferences is the peer-to-peer networking, but certainly a lot of other platforms that we can do that, and I'll let our two CIO colleagues respond perhaps. Collaboration is clearly one of the C's on the 4C agenda. So thoughts?
One of the things I've tried to do on our projects is on our website is to not only just put information about like our email project, the price and how, what we're trying to do, but all of the tools that we develop to do the analysis and build the business case are all out there. Every spreadsheet, every model, it's all out there. So it's completely available to you to see how it fits. In other words, if you're trying to explain to an agency what email probably costs them and you're not getting through, you can find a spreadsheet there that will break down every possible cost that would go into that service, which you can then just extract, reformat the spreadsheet, and use that in your conversation. So I think it's important not only to put out the lessons learned and how we did, but put the tools out and the methods out, because to us, that was where all the work was, trying to figure out that path to getting going on that. So I'd hope that other states would do that.
I would recommend that too. They have a great website, and you can get all that material. It's available. Carolyn?
I just want to second what Doug said about the networking opportunities in this group. And even though I have not had a one-on-one conversation with all the state CIOs, I know that I could just pick up the phone and call you and say, I heard X, Y, or Z, or can you advise me on this? Have you been through it, or whatever? So I think that's a real collaborative opportunity right there.
And I think Graham would tell you that talk to Grant Thornton and they'd be glad to help you out.
Absolutely.
Some consulting.
But I would also give a shout out to the various NASCIO committees, because I think they're also a great avenue for sharing ideas across states.
Very good. All right, I'm going to take one more probing and compelling question from the audience. Do we have one? Everybody's ready to get up. All right, well, please join me in thanking our excellent panel today. Thank you all, and Dugan's going to come up. Do you have some ARS questions for us? Because I didn't use any. You notice I did not use one ARS question.
I know.
I know.
And it was a great session, even without that, Doug.
Thank you.
No, we're not going to do ARS
questions.
Very good. But let me thank Doug, David, Carolyn, Graham. Great presentation. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
And Sonny, just let me say, that collaborative website on NASCIO, our community site, is a great place to share this information back and forth. A couple of quick announcements before I let you go. First off, these great documents, C4, are out at the doors on both sides, so grab one on your way out. After our 30-minute break, we're going to be back into some great discovery sessions in Ballroom 7, which is this innocuous door right here. Will be social media. Hard to tell that right now, but between that door, there's a lot of social media. Behind the next door, number 6, there'll be no more floating in the clouds. And over on the far door to your right, as you look over there, in number 5, is staying connected or mobility. We've got a 30-minute break. Then it's discovery sessions. And then after the discovery sessions, we'll be back in this room for a tremendously fun event where it's Groupthink 2, corporate trivia. So get some energy while you're on break, get your mind ready, get your trivia ready, because Doug Robinson and Stacy Rowlands are going to do the trivia contest. Thank you.